Imagine driving a heavy truck across a frozen sea that cracks under your wheels, or living in a city where the snow falls black and rivers run red. These are not scenes from a dystopian future. They are the brutal, everyday reality of our planet. We often think of extreme environments as empty, lifeless landscapes, but the truth is far more severe. From the radioactive silence of Chernobyl to a research station balancing on moving ice at the South Pole, nature does not compromise. It demands a heavy price from anything trying to survive there. Today, we will explore 16 of the most unforgiving corners on Earth, where existence is not a given, but a relentless daily war against the elements. On Baikal, winter can carry a car while methane waits beneath the ice. At Baikal, millions of methane bubbles lock under winter ice, while that same ice can crack through the silence without warning. That contradiction defines the place. The harder the freeze, the more solid it looks, and the more carefully people have to read it. The ice behaves less like ground than a material under stress. Weight, cold, and movement all press into it at once. A crossing here is not a casual drive over white open space. It is a calculation made on a surface that can sound strong 1 minute and answer with a split the next. The true scale of this place is not in the beauty of the trapped bubbles. It is the warning inside them, gas rising from below, stopped in place by cold. Baikal's calm is only the top layer. Under it, pressure keeps moving, even when the lake looks sealed shut. Life has adapted to that locked world as well. The Nerpa, Baikal's freshwater seal, has survived here in isolation for millions of years. That fact changes the scale of the lake. It is not only a body of water, it is a separate habitat, cut off long enough to shape its own survivor. The cold protects, but it also imprisons. Ice gives access to the surface, while the deep holds gases, cracks, and forces that do not answer to human plans. So Baikal is not a clean postcard of winter. It is a working test chamber where water, gas, ice, and life hold a rough balance. On Baikal, adaptation begins by respecting the ice, because the lake never truly becomes land. Snow is supposed to cover a city. In Norilsk, industry can darken it. For 45 days, polar night grips the city, and winter can fall to -50 degrees while sulfur hangs in the air. This is not hardship on the edge of industry. This is industry built directly into hardship. The mines keep the city there. Nickel wages pull workers into a place where cold, darkness, and polluted air all take a share of the pay. The black snow is not decoration for a bleak landscape. It is evidence that production has entered the weather itself. A river turned red after a nickel leak makes the cost visible in a way no official language can soften. Concrete, carries the same mark. Acid rain chews at blocks that were meant to stand, and the city has to keep repairing its own walls. Norilsk is less a settlement than a bargain. Comfort is traded for income, access, and the minerals feeding distant factories. That bargain reaches into ordinary routines. Work begins in Arctic dark, roads freeze hard, and every machine has to be serviced before it can produce. Nothing here separates climate from economy. The cold slows bodies and machinery. The mining work answers by demanding more discipline, more fuel, and more endurance. Its lesson is not that people simply conquer the Arctic. It is that the industrial age learned to pay for persistence, even when the ground, the weather, and the air resist it. The Amazon defeats engineering without ever raising a wall. Across thousands of kilometers of the Amazon's main channel, there is no bridge. The water can rise and fall by as much as 15 meters. That absence is not a map gap. It admits that some natural forces refuse the clean logic of roads and steel. Bridges need fixed banks and ground that holds. Here, the river shifts its weight, climbs into forest, and turns dry land into moving water. In flood season, the Amazon does not simply fill its channel. It spreads sideways and takes the forest with it. A road built for one season can become stranded in the next. A pier that works in low water can sit useless when the river rises over the banks. That missing bridge is the strongest statement here. It marks the boundary between what people can plan and what water can take back. Life along the banks has to move with that boundary. Boats replace pavement, timing replaces timetables, and every crossing depends on level and current. Below the muddy surface, the pressure is not only hydraulic. Electric eels, black caiman, and piranha belong to this water, so human movement has to give them space. That is the harder truth of the Amazon. It is not empty wilderness. It is active territory where every machine arrives at a disadvantage. Modern infrastructure is built to shorten distance. The Amazon stretches distance back out, forcing cargo, families, and work into slower lines. The problem is not that engineers lack courage, it is that the river keeps changing faster than concrete can solve it. So the Amazon becomes extreme by refusing one simple object, a bridge. Its power is measured not by what stands above it, but by what still cannot cross it. Before the beach appears, the road has already changed it. At Tana Barak, the signature image is a man-made passage between white limestone walls, with blue water beyond it. The beach is not the whole story. The road is the evidence. Tourism turns the place into a sequence. Access first, image second, landscape last. Limestone does not open itself for cameras. Machines have cut an approach through the pale rock, turning a coast into a frame. The contrast is sharp because the water still looks untouched, but the route in tells another story in exposed stone and tire marks. Places like this usually become famous because nature did the work. Here, fame also comes from intervention. The cliff has been made useful for the lens. People can stand in the road. The walls rise on both sides, and the sea closes the image. That is not just a design choice. It concentrates crowds, erosion, and maintenance on one narrow access line. Tourism often sells itself as discovery. At Tanna Barak, discovery has been engineered into a corridor. The machinery is absent from the postcard, but its work remains visible. Clean white rock, hard vertical faces, road underfoot. All of it carries the cost of access. The attraction works because the coast has been made to perform. Cut limestone, directed movement, and nature forced to fit the frame. A lake can disappear and still supply heavy industry. At Lop Nur, evaporation left giant ear-shaped salt rings visible from satellite images, proof that an oasis was reduced to a mineral basin. That outline is not scenery. It records water pulled out, leaving salt to dominate the ground. For centuries, water made this basin usable for movement and life. Once it retreated, the same floor turned hostile to movement. Heat and wind did the slow work. The lake bed hardened into crust, and storms began to grind across the open flats. Lop Nur is one of the clearest proofs that a resource limit can become an industrial frontier. Its isolation also served power. The same emptiness that kept people away helped shield a former nuclear test ground. That past is part of the terrain now. Salt, distance, and military secrecy all sit on the same dry basin. Then the ground was given another job. Potash extraction turned the dry lake into a giant mineral field, worked because water left useful chemistry behind. This is adaptation without comfort. Machines go where the oasis ended, and crews work inside a basin built by loss. Sandstorms make that bargain physical. They scour roads, choke equipment, and force maintenance into the basic cost of staying here. There is no recovery story here. Lop Nur does not return to its old use, it is assigned new uses. First, water supported an oasis. Then remoteness served military secrecy. Now minerals pull industry back into the empty basin. When water leaves Lop Nur, the claim does not end. States and industry return for what the dry ground still holds. The South Pole Station has to lift itself just to keep working. The Amundsen-Scott Station stands in a moving snowfield, and hydraulic columns lift the structure so drifting snow does not cover the work level. That design choice tells the main fact. Here, architecture is not a container. It is a machine built against slow pressure. For 6 months of winter, no flight can reach the station. The outside world does not vanish. It becomes unreachable by air. Near -70 degrees, fuel can freeze before it can serve an engine. Ordinary machinery loses its margin fast. This is survival engineering first, research second. Science happens only if the station keeps functioning. Heat, power, fuel, doors, seals, food, air. Every ordinary need becomes a hard requirement with no loose end. The station must carry its own backup margin because winter removes the easy answer. Spare parts, training, and discipline become part of the shelter. The polar night adds another load. Darkness lasts for months, and sleep schedules have to be protected inside walls and routines. The aurora may brighten the sky, but it does not soften the work. It only marks the scale of the isolation around the station. Inside, the hydroponic greenhouse matters because fresh growth is rare here. It gives routine and color when the outside offers cold, distance, and dark. The raised building is the clearest signature. It proves the main pressure is not one storm, but steady accumulation pressing day after day. Amundsen Scott is less a settlement than a controlled hold on the bottom of the planet. Civilization stays here by lifting steel above snow and by treating every small failure as pressure on the whole station. A winter road here is not built on land. It is laid across seawater. For part of the cold season, Amur Bay hardens into a cracked ice highway, and heavy trucks roll where boats would normally pass. That is the shock. The impossible does not arrive as a stunt here. It becomes a daily route. Engines press down on a surface that was liquid months before. Under every tire, the ice answers with sharp cracks. Amur Bay turns risk into routine, but the routine never becomes safe. It only becomes familiar. A driver is not crossing a bridge with beams and bolts. The load rests on cold pressure and a skin of frozen water. That skin is the whole bargain. Above it, people move with calm habit. Below it, the bay keeps its depth and weight. This is why the sound matters. A crack under a truck is not background noise. It is the bay testing every machine. Yet the same surface becomes a workplace. People cut holes, set lines, and sit over seawater as if the ground had always belonged there. Others enter the cold in bright orange protective suits, turning the ice edge into a drill for control and endurance. Nothing here is casual, even when it looks casual. Every movement depends on thickness, weather, weight, and the short window before the bay changes state again. The engineering is thin, but the judgment has to be exact. Roads, fishing spots, and cold water practice are pinned to a surface that keeps shifting. The discipline hides inside the ordinary. Amur Bay does not become land. Winter builds a temporary floor, and every routine on it depends on exact judgment. Here, fire can cross snow and still leave room for vineyards. Mount Etna can push red lava across white slopes, while ski resorts and grapevines keep working on the same mountain. That contradiction is the story Etna tells. It is not only ground under pressure, it is ground people choose to use. Ash settles into the soil and changes its value. For farmers, the mountain's residue becomes part of the crop, not only a warning. A volcano is supposed to draw a clean line. Heat above, life below. Etna breaks that line. On its slopes, winter sport and farming do not sit apart. They share the same restless ground, season after season. The red lava against white snow is more than contrast. It proves how quickly one mountain can change the rules. Smoke rings rising from Etna can make the pressure look almost measured below the crater. The pressure is still at work. People stay because the volcano gives something back. Ash can build soil that supports vineyards and gives labor a reason to remain. So staying is not simple confidence. It is calculation, where to build, when to work, how close to plant. That calculation is a form of engineering. It appears in resort footprints, vineyard rows, and decisions made season after season. No wall can turn Etna into a tame mountain. Adaptation here is measured in distance, timing, and the willingness to stop. Setna makes endurance visible. Life holds by reading the mountain, not by pretending the heat is gone. This is labor on ash, snow, and hot rock. The mountain gives value, then demands attention in return. On Etna, a lava slope becomes a vineyard only when distance, timing, and restraint become part of the work. The strangest lake in Trinidad holds almost no water. Its surface is natural asphalt, black, thick, and restless, with gas bubbles breaking beside tropical forest. That contrast is the point. A landscape that should be wet and green opens into a sheet of pitch that behaves less like ground than a slow machine. The most terrifying aspect is its silence. A volcano announces pressure with flame and noise. Pitch Lake works by patience. Material softens, closes, and seals. What settles on the surface can sink, vanish from sight, and return later as a fossil held for thousands of years. This is not scenery for comfort. It is a natural trap, built from black pitch, rising gas, and a surface that never fully becomes solid ground. The bubbles matter. They show the lake is not fixed. Gas keeps finding weak points, pushing through the skin and tearing it open in small bursts. Around it, The forest keeps doing what forests do. Roots push, leaves fall. Rain comes down, and still the black surface refuses normal soil. Human engineering enters this place in a strange way. The same substance that traps the unwary can harden into roads far from the lake. That is the paradox of Pitch Lake. One landscape threatens to swallow weight, yet its material helps carry traffic, industry, and daily movement. Adaptation here is raw and practical. People do not tame the lake, they learn what part can be used and what part must be respected. Every bubble warns that the surface is temporary. Under it, pressure keeps working, slow enough to ignore and strong enough to rearrange what touches it. Pitch Lake earns its place among extreme corners because it turns ground into a living risk, not by speed, but by quiet force. The most dangerous ground in Chernobyl can look completely ordinary. Radiation does not spread evenly here. One step off asphalt can hit a hidden hotspot, while the path beside it reads lower. That is why this place is not just a ruin. It is a field of invisible pressure, mapped by instruments instead of human senses. The Geiger counter becomes the bluntest narrator in the zone. Its crackle turns clean air, quiet trees, and empty streets into measured risk. Chernobyl's old images are familiar: rusted structures, abandoned rooms, the silent Ferris wheel. But the harder truth is not the metal. It is the way a technological failure keeps moving through soil, dust, roots, and living tissue, long after the machine itself has gone still. The red forest carries that warning in its name. It is not only a landmark, it is a reminder that contamination can settle unevenly and stay close to the ground. Stray dogs still move through the zone. Life has not vanished, but it works under conditions no settlement was built to accept. The mismatch is the warning. Buildings can be locked, fences can be raised, roads can be marked, but invisible contamination ignores those clean human lines. So the engineering here is not about making the place bigger, faster, or more profitable. It is about limits, marked routes, instruments, exclusion, and discipline. A paved road becomes a safety tool, and a small meter becomes a border. A wrong shortcut becomes a problem written at the level of DNA. This is the scar Chernobyl leaves on the modern age. It proves that some industrial errors do not end when the lights go out. They remain as management, measurement, and caution across generations. In the exclusion zone, power is counted not by what humans built, but by what they must keep away from. Death Valley is named for absence, but its strongest proof is motion. On racetrack playa, stones drag long tracks across a dry lake bed, while rare rain can wake buried flower seeds into a sudden superb bloom. The first mistake is to treat this valley as empty. Its heat slows everything down until motion looks like silence. Racetrack playa is the clearest evidence. Rocks sit on flat desert mud. yet their tracks run behind them like marks from a machine. Nothing here needs to move fast to prove force. The ground records pressure, direction, and patience better than any witness could. In this valley, waiting itself is a survival strategy. Seeds can lie hidden under dust until a rare storm gives them a short opening. Then the plain changes quickly, not because the desert becomes gentle, but because life has held its ground below the surface. That is the real argument of this place. Harsh land does not erase life. It forces life to use timing as its strongest tool. Rhyolite adds the human version of the same lesson. A settlement rose with the gold rush, then lost the reason that held it together. The abandoned walls are not just atmosphere. They show how fast human ambition can drain away when heat, distance, and money stop working together. In a softer landscape, a town can bend and continue. Here, every weakness is exposed by open ground, hard sun, and a lost purpose. The valley does not need constant motion to be alive. It moves in tracks, in seed banks, and in the remains of plans that could not hold. Its power is not emptiness. It is a different clock, one that rewards endurance and punishes anything built for quick gain. The Gardar loses its contest with Iceland without a single collision. Once a whaling ship, Gardar BA-64 now lies on black Icelandic stones where fog, sea wind, and corrosion keep cutting into its hull. This is industry after the work has stopped. No engine noise, no crew rhythm, only metal facing weather day after day. The wreck is an open-air museum with no glass and no protection. Its curator is climate. Every rusted plate carries a simple lesson. Steel can cross rough water for years, but abandonment changes the terms. At sea, a vessel has purpose, maintenance, and hands to keep it sealed. On shore, those supports vanish, and the weather gains time. That is why the hull feels larger than its own size. It is not only a ship, it is a piece of human industry left outside the fence. A working vessel is a promise that people will keep returning. Paint, ropes, repairs, and routine are part of the machine, not decoration. Here, that promise has ended. The coast becomes the only worker left. Iceland gives that lesson a hard edge. Black stones, thick fog, and sea air strip the scene of comfort. Nothing here needs spectacle. Corrosion does the work slowly, biting into bolts, plates, railings, and every exposed seam. The old whaling past matters because it shows how power changes shape. A machine built to harvest from the sea is now being claimed by the coast. From above, the wreck reads like a warning about scale. Human machinery can look permanent until maintenance stops and weather becomes the stronger force. The Gardar is not just a lonely relic, it is a measure of what nature can do when people step away and leave steel behind. Laki looks like a quiet green ridge, but it once pushed sunlight out of European skies. The proof is not one cone, but about 130 craters split along the land during the eruption of 1783. Laki matters because it turned a local rupture into a continental pressure wave. Lava was only the visible force. Gas did the wider work. The fissure vented a toxic cloud that moved beyond Iceland. It dimmed the sun over Europe and pulled weather, harvests, and food supply into one chain. On the island, that chain tightened fast. Around 80% of the sheep were lost, and Iceland lost roughly a quarter of its population. This is the brutal lesson of Laki. A volcano does not need to cover a capital to shake a society. It can taint pasture, empty barns, weaken trade, and turn the next winter into a national emergency. The ground cracks in one place, the cost lands far away. By the time the haze reached Europe, it was no longer just Icelandic geology. It became pressure across fields, markets, and streets. Laki is not a scenic ruin. It is a warning about distance, the false comfort that a rupture stays where it begins. The green moss now softens the black lava and makes the place look settled. That surface is the trick. Under it sits a record of heat, ash, gas, hunger, and political shock. Even calm ground here carries a bill that crossed borders. The French Revolution had many causes, but the Laki haze fed the hardship around it. Nature did not write the politics. It tightened the pressure around them. At Laki, the landscape won by reaching past the landscape. A cracked ridge in Iceland became a lever on the age. Italy's highest waterfall can vanish after making its loudest claim. Stropia drops from about 500 meters, but it returns only when melting snow and ice feed the cliff. That is the hard fact behind its spectacle. The fall is not a fixed monument. It is a short release from the high country above it. When the thaw arrives, water comes down with mud and cold debris. The cliff does not simply drain, it unloads. For a short window, gravity takes command. Then the supply weakens, the white line thins, and the great fall retreats back into rock. Stropia's limit is the point. Some extreme places test people with permanent pressure. Stropia tests them with timing. The mountain gives a narrow window, and the window closes without negotiation. Miss the melt, and the highest waterfall in Italy can shrink back to stone. That temporary force changes how people move around it. Climbers on the wall are not just seeking height, they are reading weather, runoff, and the strength of the rock. In a place like this, endurance is less about conquest than accuracy. A wrong hour can turn a route from firm to unstable, from dry to slick. This is why Stropia belongs beside harsher landscapes. Its test is not constant ice or permanent flow, it is timing and disappearance. The same thaw that brings the waterfall to life also begins the countdown. Abundance here is built to drain away. The feed is meltwater, and meltwater is ruled by temperature. The engine is seasonal from the first drop. That makes the spectacle harder, not softer. The force matters because it cannot be held in place. Here, scale is not permanence. Sometimes the biggest mark in a landscape is the one that almost leaves no mark at all. At the edge of the Arctic, billion-dollar gas and reindeer migration press into the same frozen ground. One side drives pipelines across permafrost. The other follows Nenet's routes that have held for 1,000 years. Yamal is often treated as empty space, because emptiness is useful when an energy map needs a straight line. But this ground is not empty, and it is not still. It holds cold, gas, old routes, and pressure beneath a surface that can split without warning. Permafrost looks solid from above. Under stress, it becomes a weak floor laid over trapped methane. When that gas punches upward, the tundra opens into giant craters. They are not curiosities. They are warnings carved into the worksite itself. A pipeline wants firmness. It needs steel supports, service roads, and a route that can be inspected when weather closes down the horizon. A nomadic herd needs movement. Reindeer have to cross the same land, and the Nenets cannot simply move a migration like a pipe on a drawing. This is the quiet collision at Yamal. Industry counts volume and distance. Herders count seasons, animals, ice, and safe passage. Both sides depend on the exact same layer that can fail under them. The cold is not background, it is the foundation. Cracked permafrost does not choose between a compressor station and a camp. It threatens weight, timing, and every assumption built into the route. The machinery looks dominant here, but it must negotiate with the ground every day. A thawed patch, a gas pocket, a fresh crater, and the map stops being enough. At Yamal, adaptation becomes negotiation. To extract power from the Arctic, people first have to keep standing on land that refuses to stay fixed. The gentlest meadow below Nanga Parbat sits under the largest vertical mountain face on Earth. Above Fairy Meadows, the Rupal face rises nearly 4,600 meters, a vertical wall of ice, rock, and weather. This mountain does not need romance. Its scale does the speaking before any story can soften it. The lower slopes can look calm, even welcoming. Then the face takes over, and the whole valley becomes a warning about height. On the Rupal side, distance is not horizontal. It stacks upward, layer after layer, until movement becomes a test of lungs, grip, and judgment. A wrong step here is not a small mistake. It can become a drop measured in miles, with no room to bargain. Snow and ice do not stay fixed on a wall like this. When a slab releases high above, the sound rolls down first. Then the valley feels the force. That sound cuts down human confidence. It turns talk of conquest into checks on snow, weather, and strength. Every route, every camp, every load has to answer those conditions. The mountain dictates weight, timing, shelter, and the narrow windows when movement is possible. Fairy Meadows sharpens the contradiction. Soft grass below, hard white face above, safe-looking ground beside raw exposure. That contrast is why Nanga Parbat holds attention without decoration. It offers a clean view of the bargain. Approach carefully, or the terrain will expose the error. No machine can flatten this place into ease. Human planning here becomes smaller, stricter, and more humble. Routes, shelter, weather reading, and the discipline to wait. At this height, the larger rule is stripped bare. Extreme places are not conquered. They are read, worked around, and endured. The takeaway is plain. Engineering does not conquer Earth. It only buys narrow margins where terrain still holds the stronger hand. Follow the places where survival is measured in steel, fuel, ice, and pressure.